Hello, NWI. Welcome to Bluer by the Lake, the podcast that explores NWI life through a blue lens. I'm your host, Tracy Martin, and joining me today is State Senator Rodney Pol. Rodney represents Indiana District 4, which includes Northern Porter County, including Burns Harbor, Chesterton, Porter, Portage, as well as portions of Lake LaPorte County, including Michigan City and Westville. Did I miss any, Rodney?
No, I'm just all the beach communities up there as well. So yeah, I think the one thing you missed, I represent the best district. Actually, it's funny. Today there was some folks from Governor Braun's office had never been to the lake, and I had the distinct pleasure of being able to show them the only national park in the state of Indiana, and it's right here in my district. So I get a lot of bragging rights. A lot of bragging rights.
Yeah, and did you mention while they were there with you that some federal funding for those parks would be kind of nice?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I believe me, I went through everything. I mean, unfortunately, it was almost too nice of a day to go to the park because I said, just wait until these employees have to be out here in 99-degree weather and it's an hour and a half wait to get into the park and everybody's very upset and there's trash everywhere. That's what happens when there's federal funding. That part's embarrassing. So, oh, believe me, you lay that part on thick when you have people there that know that this is what we should be supporting and here's the issue. So
When that line outside West Beach
yeah.
gets all the way down, yeah. So, alrighty, well, so as you know, Rodney, I recently attended a 2025 legislative update sponsored by wait, guys, this is a mouthful. I still can't get over how much of a mouthful this name is. The Lake County Federated Republican Women's Club. And it was eye-popping session, I'll tell you. So I was kind of there incognito, and I'm going to apologize to anybody who read the description of the title on this podcast and said, "Ooh, horse contrails, conspiracy theories, and horse buckteeth," and "Ooh, yes, please, I want to hear that." If you want to hear all the tea on that stuff, you're going to have to listen to the previous episode where I talked to Jane Wallace, who's also my incognito spy in the session. And we talk about a lot of the things that the legislators were super proud of and their accomplishments and the reaction of the people that were there and the things that they cared about. But they left a lot of things off the table. Basically anything that anybody really cares about. So I asked Rodney if he would be willing to come in and kind of help fill in those gaps because they were really big gaps in the coverage that they gave there. But before we get there, does my description of this surprise you, Rodney? Is this what you
No,
did?
I'm not familiar with the organization. You said it was a mouthful, and I'd never heard that string of words before. So I don't know. You said Lake County. It was Lake. You say federal. What was it?
Lake County Federated Republican Women's Club.
Okay,
They were
I've
the hosting
never heard of it.
organization.
Yeah.
And the people just for the record, folks, this was a state session. It was intended to be a legislative update from region. State Senator Rick Niemeyer was there. State Senator Dan Dernolk was there. State Rep Mike Aylesworth, State Rep Julie Olthoff, and State Rep Hal Slager. So again, they left pretty much anything of substance off the table, or they danced around it so much that I don't know how they don't have Charlie horses. It was something to see. So let's start with some of the things that really didn't get discussed, and let's start with toll roads. State Rep Olthoff spoke at length about the tollway bill. Mostly, I think, because she was tired of people complaining about it. And she's insisting that 94 is A, not getting anything, and that B, the legislation makes it more difficult to get a tollway passed, not less. And that doesn't jive with what I've read. So, can you give us a quick summary of this and kind of shed a little light?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely have to push back on that. In law as it existed prior to 1461 getting passed, there was a buffer that prohibited any tolling of any of the interstates within 75 miles of any other toll road. And there was only one toll road in the state of Indiana, and then there was the toll bridge down over by Kentucky. So that one toll road was 80/90, which is our toll road up here. So we were in that buffer zone that up until this year, there couldn't be any more toll roads up here. And so I'd have to push back. I mean, I don't understand how it could be harder to establish a toll road if we've essentially said, okay, the heart of this bill is we want the governor to have the power to go directly to the legislature or to the federal government and the Federal Highway Commission and be able to get a toll road here. But now we're going to essentially remove that buffer. That buffer was our protection. So
Yeah. And so another thing that State Rep Olthoff was really proud of was making it more difficult for Purdue students to vote. She felt this was a really good thing. I know we have a lot of Purdue and IU alums here in NWI, and I have yet to meet a single one of them who are particularly excited about the changes to our universities in this legislative session. And so, can you talk a little bit about the bills that impact students in university governance?
yeah, I mean, as far as the student ID bill, that I mean, every session it seems like there's something that's aimed at stopping people from voting, and that was, to me, that's what it is it's not as if they came to us with, hey, we have X amount of students or any single student that has ever illegally voted because they used the student ID. That to me was very, very strange. I mean, if this were such a serious issue, then come to us with either criminal charges that have been filed or convictions that have been upheld where you had a student that was illegally voting. And so that always gets me, pretty riled up when I see, well, we just want to do this because, we believe that this is what's happening. And then you realize, no, this is what's happening. This is by design. It's something that's happening in every single state, where you have a Republican supermajority or a majority. And it's always under this idea, well, it's election security. Well, if that's the case, demonstrate that this is actually happening. Because if it's not, then it, to me, just is just that chilling effect of, well, if you don't have even if you are a resident here, if you don't have like a valid driver's license because you just don't drive because you live on a college campus and you don't need a car.
And some of them don't allow it. Like Purdue doesn't let its first-year students have any sort of transportation on campus. So
But
they're
what are
stuck with on-campus voting, which, by the way, during the Harris-Walz administration, it's all of a sudden Tippecanoe County decided that a long-standing on-campus voting booth was no longer needed.
Right.
The naked partisanship is, no one seems to care about hypocrisy anymore. And I guess, as a politician, I'm sure that doesn't surprise you, but it sure surprises me sometimes. Were there any other student-facing bills that really caught your eye? I know there were some recent ones passed that I was like, oh, please, dear God.
Yeah, I mean, as we had the trustees that were essentially the appointing of the trustees at one university, at Indiana University, that was at the very end of session put into the budget, which, the budget is the budget. If you want some bad legislation to go through and you don't want it as a standalone bill, you get it in the budget. And that's essentially what had happened. I mean, we were required to pass a budget, where we have to do so, otherwise we go into special session. So when you want a really nasty bill, you don't have a committee. Yeah, you throw it in there. And I mean, as an IU alum, that was a big slap in the face, is that, it wasn't as if we were hearing that this somehow or another there was a problem with the trustees, but what it seems to be is we want more control over what's happening at universities, which is, we want to politically, almost politically control what is the content of the curriculum, what are even the classes or the degrees that are even offered. This was something that there was no committee discussion on it. It was nothing that we were hearing from the general public. It was essentially, well, we're just going to give the governor the option or the opportunity to pretty much handpick the trustees, which were previously elected. So that to me was a major shift, particularly since it only wasn't Purdue. It was only IU that had occurred with that, and I think that really kind of sent shockwaves through the higher education field, that there is this this takeover in what truly should be an ideal of democracy, where you have the free exchange of ideas, where you have the ongoing discussions about things that are both current, historically what has taken place, and culturally what is where we are. Now all of a sudden it's like, well, you have one person that's now designating these appointees. That's a huge problem for me.
It's what you're describing here is a naked power grab, which is what it is, and it's and the model that other states have been utilizing, in particular Florida. What the DeSantis has been doing that for the last few years as he's turned Florida into MAGA's favorite destination. And as a Michigan alum who watched in utter disgust and horror when our then president, not anymore, thank God, rolled over on DEI without, a blink of the eye, I can sympathize. It's really upsetting because if you're a Big Ten kid, though we take those values seriously. We believe in our educational institutions, and we believe that they're going to represent the values that they instilled in us forever. And we're seeing that that's not the case. And I'm very interested to see where this goes next, because Florida's been struggling. Gainesville hasn't been doing so great. They, my own alma mater's president that is no longer has a home anywhere. That's another story. We're not going to get into that now. But it's a juicy one, and you should Google it. So let's move on to the big elephant, the property tax bill. Now, it was very amusing, I'm not even going to lie. Watching this panel discuss this, you could tell they would rather have talked about an audit and the contortions they went through to talk about this bill in a positive light it was amusing. It was gymnastic. We'll just put it like that. And it was extremely clear that none of them were big fans. So any thoughts on, well, let's start off. Walk through this bill with us. Tell us why they were holding their noses as they spoke about it.
It's a massive bill. I mean, it is, it's actually very, very tough to understand because it is so complex, and throughout session it changed so much. You had different iterations of that bill that had both started at the beginning of session than what came out. You saw, I think you finally started to see some of these, and something that I've been really hoping is that local governments would get engaged, because a lot of local governments are not, they are there to do a single job, which is provide services to the community. A lot of them try to stay as far away from from identity politics and national politics as possible. These are folks that you will see at your gas stations, at your grocery stores. These are folks that are charged with making sure your parks are clean, and that that your response time for police is good, that your roads are paved. That's what they care about. And in order to do so, they rely on your property taxes. This bill really changed how both those local governments, how the public schools, how your county governments, how they're all funded. And when I say how, it's they cut into what they're actually going to be, what they can recollect. The problem with that is, and I think why you have such a big issue with folks that voted for it being able to speak about it, is if you ask them, okay, can you tell me where this funding needed to be cut? What was being spent by public schools or by local government that was just so so egregious that you had to pass this bill that potentially provides at the very, very most, for houses that are just at the top tier of what's out there, maybe $300 a year in property tax relief, for if you're and at that rate, if you can afford a house like that, it's probably $300 a year is probably not a whole lot of money to you. Then when that's in the aggregate, you're going to be talking about massive cuts. I mean, you're talking about for some communities, potentially not hiring new police officers or not filling positions, not being able to finish projects. Right now, a lot of these, these municipalities are looking at, hey, well, we need infrastructure projects, or hey, we want to revamp a park. Well, one, you need to know how much, you need to have some certainty about how much money you're going to have coming in, and a lot of that is projected with your property taxes. Two, how much you can bond, interestingly enough, and this was not a part of that discussion, is really based on what your property tax base is. So if you cut into what the property tax reclamation is, you can't bond as much either. So good luck being able to pay for projects, because now not only are you not going to get that in property tax reclamation, you're also not even going to be able to say, even if you were fiscally savvy of a community and say, okay, that's fine, we don't have the money coming in the next couple of years, but we can bond for this going on for the next, to do a 10-year bond or 15-year bond. Now you can't. Or now it's going to be even harder, because those lending institutions are going to go, ooh, yeah, you have less money that we can predict that's going to be coming in. So this is a very, very tough, a tough pill to swallow for a lot of local communities, because ultimately where they ended up is the property tax relief that I think a lot of these folks that were supporting the bill thought was they were going to be able to champion turns into maybe $94 a year on average. I think that's the average Indiana Hoosier homeowner would get about $94 a year. And what ends up happening with that is when you split that up over 12 months and you really break it down, it's like, so I get $7 a month off of my property taxes. Like that's $7 a month is less than what you're probably paying for a subscription to this podcast, or to something that is, your Spotify account or whatever, your streaming accounts, it's less than half of what that is. So yeah, I mean, it's very problematic, because when people all of a sudden have, less response time for their police departments and they're waiting longer for services or to see the roads paved or their roads plowed in the winter, that's going to piss a lot of people off. And so I think it is very hard to have this conversation about it, because the numbers that we were even using then in session, actually now as they're being studied 3 months later, it's like it's going to actually be worse. So yeah, I wouldn't want to talk about that if I voted for it either. But luckily I didn't, so I don't have to. I don't have to say that was a bill that I supported. I think it's a crap bill.
So one thing that got brought up was that it was going to impact cities like Gary more because of the proportion of individual home ownership versus business districts. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think Gary is going to get impacted by that. And then, I mean, I think that there are definitely like big, there was also business personal property tax relief that was put in there, something that was not even asked for. Like we didn't have businesses coming to us going, hey, we need business personal property tax relief, which is you have real estate property taxes that you pay for, and then another version of it is the the business personal property, so machinery, things like that those businesses will pay taxes on and have. Well, as you saw, like the decrease in the amount of taxes that can be claimed by the local communities, those like one kind of big industry towns, like for example Burns Harbor, they can take a serious bath, and Gary's one of them as well, because of business personal property tax, and with the mills that are up there. And in addition to that, you have a city like Gary that property tax reclamation is already low. When you then cut the property tax reclamation, and it's 50, the other thing about Gary, it's 56 square miles. That's 56 square miles to police, pave, and plow, and provide parks for all the big P's, right? What you end up having is it's bigger, it's bigger than San Francisco geographically, but the disinvestment that's happened there, and then on top of that, to cut property tax reclamation, how does Gary continue to thrive under that? I mean, you're pulling the rug from underneath the city that is really on the verge of some great things. I mean, Gary has really held it down as best as they possibly can under the circumstances. And so this kind of really puts the foot back on the neck of Gary as far as being able to economically prosper. And that's the thing. It's people don't want to invest in a city that can't invest in itself. I mean, that's the problem, is that you're going to see Indiana become less attractive, not more attractive to people. We already, that's the thing, is we already had some of the lowest property tax in the Midwest. So I don't think that was a big push that, people were going, oh, well, if Indiana just lowers their property tax just a little bit more, maybe we'll move there and invest. They're going to go, cool, Indiana does not have a great public school system, or they don't have great public school systems because they don't invest in it. I don't want to move there because I don't want my kids to go to school there. Indiana doesn't have great, Indiana does not, the communities there don't provide the same amenities, or don't have the same services, or don't have the same quality of services. The quality of life indicators are always so bad for Indiana. It makes no sense. I mean, really, SB1, I think, is going to be really, really problematic. And I think the issue is that this is passed in 2025. It gets phased into 27 and 28. by then the next election has happened and people will stop talking about it. But the damage is going to be permanent and continuous until you have a reversal of some of these policies, which is tough because then you're the person that says, hey, we should go back to the way it was, and the folks on the other side, well, doesn't that mean raising our taxes? Well, no, it's right sizing to where we were, but you will forever be the person that raised taxes if you reverse what they're doing, even if it's not even that much, but that little much adds up to a whole lot when you look at the grand scheme of things. So
it does. And this kick it down the road right after the elections, we just saw that, didn't we? So let's move. Well, here let's spend one quick more second on this one, because what I found really surprising is that, again, none of them liked this bill. They have a legislative supermajority. So why did they feel the need to flex on this? What constituency were they appeasing? Because, again, I didn't see any right or left or center Indiana voter clamoring for property tax relief.
I mean, you had some pressures from it. I mean, ultimately, this was the Braun promise. I mean, this was campaign promises that essentially, new administration going to come in with sweeping change, and I don't think they realized, one, how hard that was going to be, and two, how it is. We're not Florida. We're not some of these other states where they have different economies that can withstand this, and there's still funding on the table. We're a state that, we have 4 seasons. We're going to, these communities have to have a lot more, you're going to have to invest a lot more to maintain what those communities have. I mean, our roads are probably one of the most expensive aspects of government outside of public outside of, schools and public safety. We obviously are, a place that we have to continuously, support these local communities and the school districts. And when we don't, I think that's going to be very, when we don't more so than we already are lacking, I think that's going to become very, very apparent. I think it is going to become very, very, very problematic going forward. So yeah, when you have somebody that's stuck on a campaign promise, that's the way that I kind of look at it. It sounds great, right? We're going to give you property tax relief. But I highly doubt that when somebody looks at their property tax bill next year or in 2027, they're going to go, oh yeah, this was the relief I was looking for. I just don't see it happening.
No, I agree with you. I don't think it will. I think they're going to be like, I don't think they're going to notice that $96. But what I do think they're going to notice is if their ability to access Medicaid is made dramatically more difficult. And, as we've been seeing in the news, our commander-in-chief has got Medicaid in his sights. And apparently, so too does our legislature. Representative Aylesworth was particularly proud of every effort he could take to limit Medicaid access. He rhapsodized about this. Now, can you talk about what happened to health care in this legislative session? Was anybody in Indiana successful in efforts to make it more difficult for Hoosiers to access Medicaid?
Yeah, the Senate Bill 2 was rough. The way that it started off, it was essentially kicking 243,000 people off of HIP by, essentially disinvesting the Medicaid funding that goes to HIP. Here's the wild thing about it. When you have conversations that go on about HIP in particular, prior to the pandemic, one of the talking points that I continuously heard was, we were right around 400,000 people that were on HIP, which is Indiana's Obamacare. They don't call it Obamacare here because they don't want to attribute to Obama. It's the HIP plan, but it's Medicaid funded healthcare coverage for individuals between 18 and 64. So that number ballooned up quite a bit during and after the pandemic. And at the same time, the Indiana legislature was out there promoting and advertising HIP as an option, trying to make sure that people were, got health care. There was funding that went into that, and as part of SB2, I think that was one of the big things that was one of those indicators for me. Was like, oh, I see what's happening here. So they cut funding for advertisement. We don't want anybody to know about HIP anymore. We don't want to spend on it anymore. This got too expensive for us. The crazy thing is they were essentially saying, well, we're cutting off able-bodied, sorry, able-bodied people, essentially trying to force people to go into the workplace, as if that was the caricature that they were trying to draw. The HIP recipients were the people that were just sitting at home, not working, living off of the government and getting free healthcare. What that does not take into account are the working class people that are actually that are working. They may not work at a job where they qualify for healthcare, but they can receive HIP because they qualify for HIP. Sorry, excuse me. So I think they had to really walk that back to where they weren't just, they weren't just cutting a specific number down to, they was basically saying, we're going to cap it at 500,000. 500,000, and we're not going to spend any more money on advertising. They had to, I think, really walk that back, because the question became, okay, well, then who do you cut? Who is getting cut from HIP then, from the Healthy Indiana plan, if you're just taking essentially 30% of those individuals and just taking them off? Like, who gets the pink slip on HIP then? And how do they find out? What happens to them? Where do they go? So I think that once we started asking those questions, it became a very, very difficult conversation. And so instead, it was limiting the funding that's spent on HIP. So we're only going to spend X amount. And so it's getting the same means, essentially. They're still getting their way. People are going to be cut off from the state on HIP. It's just they're not going with a number of people. They're just going with the amount of money that's spent. And so again, this is to me, it's a problem, because you're talking about people's health. You're talking about their livelihood. And when you do this, what ends up happening? If I'm a HIP recipient and I'm working in the gig economy, I'm driving for Uber, I'm working, working at a local restaurant, but none of these jobs that I have can provide me with health insurance. What do? Go to HIP, right? So I get into a car accident and I don't have any health insurance. What do I do? I'm going to go to the emergency room. They're going to take me in. Those hospitals are going to, have a number of individuals just like me, where they're going to have to provide me thousands of dollars of services. They're going to send me bill after bill after bill. I'm not going to be able to pay those bills. They're going to eventually write that off. They're not going to reclaim the funding that they needed. They're going to have to start looking at ways to to pay for it. What are they going to do? They're going to raise the rates. So we're going to pay for it one way or another. I just medically just went into bankruptcy, with that car accident. That one car accident pretty much wrecked my life. I'm going to be, I'm going to owe this money for however long. I'm going to have bill collectors after me forever. My credit's going to be ruined. And, all the while, the hospitals are going to raise the rate. So to me, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way. And, the amount of funding that I see going other places, to me, demonstrates that our priorities are just way out of whack with the supermajority. They're just way out of whack. We're not really paying attention to what's happening with the working class and, with the working poor. Those are harsh realities. So
Yeah, it's like a clown car of cruelty. That's what I have taken to calling any Republican supermajority that I've encountered, because the logic behind choices that are being made is just so circuitous, you can't get anywhere with it. You're just and cruelty becomes performative. And so far, Indiana's version of that cruelty hasn't been quite as overtly in your face as the national level, but the impacts are the same. And what do you think about the likelihood of any of this being addressed or undone in future legislative sessions? Like, what's your hope for next year?
I think particularly with SB1, kind of going back to that, I think that there are, and with the passage of the big beautiful bill in healthcare, there is 100% going to have to be, some correcting of the legislation that we passed here locally. That was my big thing, was what are we doing here? What we are, we're getting ready to make these drastic sweeping changes that are really going to impact these communities and our most vulnerable populations. Before, we know we just had an election. We know that the Trump administration is coming in. We know that he's going to want to do his own, essentially undoing and defunding of some of the most basic civil services. You guys know that you can't double cut here. And if you do, wow. I mean, if you do, and you assume that this is, that this is going to be the way, you're going to see, a massive, massive, massive problem with the vast majority of the population. I mean, you're talking, 50 something percent of the, of the population that is making less than like $55,000 a year. What do you think happens to them when all of a sudden you see job loss, and they lose their health insurance? The compounding of issues that happens when you have a recession and a downturn in the economy. We couldn't have had, you couldn't have a worse combination of policy mixed with economic factors at one time, and to just assume that, well, we'll cut our way out of this. You're not going to be able to. You're not going to be able to cut your way out of, ensuring that you have a population that can, that just needs bare essentials at that point. So yeah, I mean, as far as the, some numbers that I had on the big beautiful bill and it pertains to, Medicaid, I mean, you're talking about 2 million Hoosiers right now that rely on some form of Medicaid plan. I mean, for a population, of 7 million, you got 2 million that rely on some form of Medicaid. The massive cuts that are coming are going to hit such a huge part of that population. So with the work requirements, even though you have like 92% of eligible adults already working and, or exempt, these new requirements are still going to push about 5.2 million Americans, off of Medicaid by 2034. You're adding, on top of that with the big beautiful bill, they're adding, $35 per visit fees for surgeries, emergency room visits, imaging, specialist care, and penalizing, patients for essentially just seeking help. They're capping the federal provider tax programs like Indiana's hospital assessment fee. That's threatening about $640 million in annual Medicaid funding for our hospitals to stay open. I mean, that's one of the biggest things is the communities that are going to get hit the worst are some of the rural communities. I mean, some of the folks that have really just thought, well, I'm voting for, voting for a better quality of life when these hospitals start closing up in rural areas. Yeah, that's going to be. There's not going to be anybody else to blame.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you make the mess, you're gonna have to face the consequences of it, or hopefully. So, Senator, thank you for your time. We are about out of time. So let's let everybody know what you're going to be up to next and how they can reach you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my next, I guess, move is I've got a couple of things that I'm working on going into next session. I was able to get a summer study session on water safety. As far as a curriculum, yeah. I mean, I'm sure anybody out there listening, if you ever catch fire, what do? You stop, drop, and roll. Everybody knows that. I mean, it's just ingrained into us. But the amount of people that catch fire to the amount of people that drowned, especially when you have, the one of the leading causes of I think one or number two leading cause for people under 16 years old for accidental death is drowning. And if you ask, what do you do when you're drowning? There isn't, people don't think of anything, and it's essentially you flip. You float and you follow. A lot of people don't realize that calmness of flipping over on your back, floating, letting yourself float and following if there is, for example, a current. Those are things that save your lives. And, every summer we've just watched people drown after drowning after drowning in some of these, in Lake Michigan and even some of the inward lakes or even some pools. These are things that you wonder why haven't we addressed this? So that's one of the issues that I've got coming up. Some of the other ones that I have, as far as the toll roads, I've got toll road legislation. One of the things we didn't talk about with education in particular, and it's something that just pisses me off, I just get really, really worked up about, this last year we spent $497 million on vouchers for private schools. So individuals that are, and removed the cap. It's universal now. We can provide universal vouchers. Can't provide universal health care, but you can provide universal vouchers. So individuals that are, making, over $250,000 now, up to infinity amount of money, get $8,000 roughly from the state for each individual kid that they have to send them to a private school. Essentially taking public funds away from public schools and sending them to private schools. To me, it's just wrong. So if we can do that, if you can give education vouchers to rich families, you can give transportation vouchers. So if you're going to establish toll roads, give us transportation vouchers. Give us an iPass that's fully loaded, and if we use it, we use it. And for anybody that either lives in a county that has a toll road that runs through it, or if you work in a county that runs through it. So, yeah, if you're going to toll us and you want to collect these funds from these folks that are driving through our state, fine, go ahead and do so. Give us our iPasses and let us hit the road then, because that is, to me, that makes sense. So that's one of the things that I'm working on. Thank you. One of the other ones is I actually just was talking to Jan Katz, who's from here in Northwest Indiana. She's a good friend of mine. We were just talking about this today. The idea that we might be able to, the CCDF vouchers, the child care vouchers. Those are, while the eligibility for education vouchers for private school is, infinity. CCDF is still only 150% of the federal poverty line, which is still, in order to qualify, you're making less than essentially, I think, $44,000 a year for a family of four. So it's wild. Yeah, it's very low. It's very, very low. It's actually, it's insulting, which childcare is such a major, major issue. Attendance at private schools is not a major issue for us, but childcare is a huge, huge economic issue for us because more people can't go to work because they can't afford to send their kids to childcare, so they just stay home. They would essentially make up their paycheck and send that to a childcare provider, almost directly for what they're doing. I mean, it costs too much. So they have these things, these vouchers, CCDF vouchers, and you would hope that we would make it easy for people to get those. Well, you can't apply for a CCDF voucher until your child is born, which puts you on a wait list right now. And that wait list is anywhere between 8 and 12 months. So if you wanted a child care voucher, you're not going to get one for a full year likely. But what drives me kind of crazy about that is, life begins at conception, right? So then why do we have to wait until the child is born to provide, the ability to apply for PCDF? You can't even apply for it.
I want to hear you on the floor saying that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's like, what? If you're living in this hellscape where that's the definition, then you know what? Then let's apply it. So that's I can't take credit for that. That was something that Jan came up with, and I was like, I love it. Let's work on that. So other than that, expanding the Lifeline law for drug overdose. Right now, Lifeline law only applies to individuals. Like if, for example, you have some college kids that are out drinking, and somebody drinks too much, the Lifeline law applies to the individuals who were drinking, the kids that are there that called 911, and then now it applies to the individual who drank too much to call for help. That makes sense. I mean, that's great. But we don't extend the same to drug overdoses. And as we know, there are more drug overdoses, a lot more than alcohol. So that is going to be, one of the things that I try to get done because, as we know, the intimidation, and the apprehension for people to call for help oftentimes costs somebody their lives. So that's one that I'm working on. Let's see what else.
Awesome. This is great stuff. I mean, folks, elect a Democrat. Saying, because this is substantive policy that improves people's lives. Thank you for doing this. I mean, it's just got to be oh my God. I can't, you must feel like you're just like in this lion's den sometimes because everything is arrayed against you down there. It must be so. I feel so sorry for the Democrats in our state legislature. I mean,
it's not for the weakest stomach. I will say that.
I'll bet. So I interrupted you. You were going to talk about something else that you're working on.
Oh, all right. I mean, I know we gotta wrap it up. But one other ones. There's some really great people in Michigan City that are doing some really cool stuff. And one of the things that I've seen is there is, and this is, I'm trying to figure out a way to expand this and try to promote it. And it may be legislatively, it may not, but it was such a cool idea. They have the farmers market that's over in Michigan City. They have obviously realized that they live in Michigan City is a produce desert. Gary, for example, produce desert. It's just a full grocery store desert. And one of the things that I continuously hear about, in a lot of the conservative circles is, there's this resentment that, you have families that are spending WIC and SNAP benefits, EBT on like sweets and they're buying pops and they're buying all this junk, and it's like you're going to the corner store to the only place that they can buy food and using the only place that will take that. So like, what do you expect them to do? They have these benefits. They have to use these benefits. it's not as if the corner store is selling, fresh produce and, range farm eggs. I mean, this is what individuals that are on these benefits have. So the folks in Michigan City at the farmers market have worked with their vendors to allow, so the vendors will agree to take those benefits, so WIC and SNAP benefits, and will be able to, they'll provide 3 times the amount of whatever the spending power is for to enable individuals to buy fresh produce in Michigan City. And so
Get out of here. That's so awesome.
So, that's one of the things that I'm trying to work on, is to see how we can get this to really kind of expand to other places that are these food deserts. Because obviously it's worth the vendors' while. Whatever the benefit is that they're working on there. I'm like, how do we get this to work in other places? I mean, if we can't get brick and mortar to move into some of these communities, but we have farmers markets, then how do we do this? So that's going to be one of the ones that I'm working on, just to try and solve, just being able to chip away at some of this produce desert issues. So yeah, I've got a whole other list. I mean, I'll end up back on, every year I file bills on workers' compensation, trying to get our workers' compensation benefits raised because they're just abysmally low. Same thing with unemployment. Our unemployment rate, our unemployment benefits are less than $400 a week. I
remember I was unemployed for a minute, and I was like, "You got to be kidding me!"
Yeah, I mean,
I moved here. I could have stayed in Illinois.
Oh yeah, I mean, so those two, and then legalization of marijuana, either recreationally or medicinally. Preferably.
Oh my God, the money we're leaving on the table with that—it's maddening.
Oh yeah, I mean, 60% of the clientele that goes to Michigan is are Indiana residents. 60% of the clientele at the dispensaries. So I mean, you want to talk about us just, and the funny thing is the argument, you have two different arguments. Well, one is we want to wait till it's done federally, and two is, well, it's the old reefer madness argument. Well, it's going to open the floodgates, and I'm like, where do you think those 60% of individuals are going? They're coming back here. They're going to buy. They've been buying marijuana since marijuana's been around. It's going to be here. It's always going to be here. Obviously, any attempt, to curtail that has been realized as a futile effort by 39 or 40 other states. Indiana just, we just love sending our money to Michigan, apparently.
Apparently, and Illinois. Why not? I'm like, go ahead, folks.
Yeah, and love putting people in jail and giving them criminal records for something that is legal in another state, and then wonder why. Well, why don't people want to move here? It's like.
Alrighty, this has been delightful. I cannot thank you enough for all your time today. I know you have got a packed agenda every day, clearly, with all these things you're doing. So thank you for fighting the good fight. Thank you for fighting for us. It's really liberating to hear because, oh God, you said things like food stamps for farmers markets, and I'm like, oh my God, there are still Democrats in the world. Thank you. So, alrighty, so. In the meantime, if there's ever anything that you want to come on here and talk about, do let us know. Please do try to find some time to enjoy the dunes. I know I'm going to be up there later. And as for the rest of us at WI, stay cool and meet us at the lake. Bye.
See you guys.